what happens when you start saying no from love instead of fear, guilt, or any other word you'd like to describe it as. But it's the base is always fear. Your whole world shifts. When you say no to chaos, you create room for calm. When you say no to hustle, you create room for flow. When you say no to relationships that drain you create room for divine connections that sustain. And your yes becomes even more powerful because people will realize that if you're saying yes, really wants to do this. She really means this. This is something she's really wanting to give her energy. But if you say yes to everything, they're just like, but your presence becomes magnetic. Your presence becomes even more sacred and appreciated because you're no longer negotiating your worth. You're embodying it. You're listening to More with V, Unleash Your Inner Badass. In today's episode, we're diving into the power of the sacred no. But at the end of this conversation, you'll see how saying no can actually open more doors, protecting your peace, sharpening your purpose, and aligning you with your divine truth. So let's take a breath and let's step into your power. Yeah, with all the powers that you see, can't be nobody else. A goddess that's me. What you see is what you get. You ain't seen nothing yet. Guarantee sure bet. Are you ready? I'm coming out. I'm coming out. I'm coming in. Lost and loose. I'm coming out. I'm coming out. I'm coming in. Lost and loose. Hey, Soul Fam. Welcome back to More with V, Unleash Your Inner Badass. I'm your host, V, intuitive coach, bonus mom, spiritual rebel, and your permission slip to say no without guilt, shame, or second guessing. Today, we're reclaiming one of the most sacred spiritual practices out there, the word no. Not the defensive, fear-based no. Not the I'm tired, but I'll still do it no. But the sacred no. The one that protects your peace, your purpose, and your power. Because when you start saying no from your soul, everything changes. And I know we've talked about previously people pleasing and honoring our sacred yes, and now our sacred no. Let's start with this truth. Every no creates space for your true yes. Without boundaries, we leak energy, love, money, creativity, and clarity. And for many of us, especially women, especially nurturers and caregivers, that leakage started young. So I remember a time when I said yes to everything and everyone just because I was like, well, I never know if I'm going to ever get this again, so I need to say yes now because what if? Right? And I was saying yes to every opportunity, every request, and every can you just, and you know what? I was running on empty, but calling it purpose. I was exhausted, but pretending I was being of service. Just talking about it made me like out of breath, right? That was not alignment. That was people-pleasing and spiritual drag. Well, when you start to understand that no is not rejection, it's redirection, you stop seeing boundaries as walls and start seeing them as sacred gates. Gates that keep what's meant for you in and what drains you out. And I really learned that because I really have come to know that boundaries are the whole reason why we're here. The whole reason why we're having this human experience is so that, one, we can remember who we are, whose and who we are, and how to create healthy boundaries for ourselves, where we're not getting left out of the equation and we are able to say yes and no with ease and grace. So let's reflect. All right, let's take a deep breath. Let's ask ourselves, where in your life are you leaking energy because you're afraid to say no? Where in your life are you leaking energy because you're afraid to say no. Is it with a friend? Is it a family member? Family members, a client, or maybe even yourself? Are you afraid to tell yourself no? Are you afraid to tell yourself, hey, not right now? Rome wasn't built in a day. It'll still get done. Everything's not going to fall apart if I just take a moment for myself. So boundaries are not about separation. And, I used to have this thing with the word commitment, because I was like, oh my gosh, if I commit to something, then I am locked into it forever and ever. Amen. And I was like, so I was resistant to commitment. So of course you're going to have a fear of commitment. Of course you're going to have resistance to commitment if you feel like, oh my gosh, once I commit, that's it. It's really about, I'm committing right now in this space and time. Am I committed to something? Yes. But tomorrow or the next day, I may not be as committed to that thing. And that's okay, because that's how we learn our boundaries. That's how we learn what is an alignment for us. That's how we learn what works for us. And it's not to say that we just, arbitrarily do things and, commit to things and then we're like, whatever. You know what I mean? It's not about taking it light. It's really about really being mindful about what feels good in our lives. So, like I said, boundaries are not about separation. They're about stewardship. Your no is your soul saying, I honor my divine assignment more than someone else's expectations. So let's make this practical. I love that, because spiritual lessons are powerful, but the embodiment of them is where the real magic happens. In relationships, a sacred no might look like refusing to overgive, refusing to sacrifice yourself and your time, dimming your light. It's saying, I love you, but I will not shrink myself to keep the peace. I love you, but I will not overstep my boundaries. In business, it's saying no to clients or collaborations that feel misaligned. The ones that promise money but cost your energy. All money is not good money, and I have learned that really, really well. Just because I love someone, I think they're great, I see their potential, they have to see their potential. If they don't see their potential, if they are looking for something that's more codependent than self-responsibility, we're not going to be aligned. So as much as I love you, as much as I care about you, as much as I think that you're an amazing being, we can't work together because it's going to be a misalignment. And I am going to honor my boundaries because other people are going to honor theirs. And even if they don't honor theirs, that's not my business. My business and what I have control over is me and my responsibilities and my commitment to myself. So, and yes, I've been there, saying yes to something that looked abundant and looked fabulous, but left me spiritually bankrupt. So in parenting, it could look like it's modeling boundaries for the next generation. It's teaching our kids that no is not rude, it's responsible. That they don't have to earn rest, respect, or love by over giving. And I, for one, am so glad that I've learned that so that I can pass that on. Because before that, I would have taught them, you sacrifice yourself by any means necessary. And even when you have this much left to give, you give it all. Give it until you're dry. No, that is just not conducive to how I work. It's not conducive to my energetic bank. It's not helping anybody, right? So I have a journal prompt for you. So where is a yes costing you your peace? Write this down, people. Write this down. Where is a yes costing you your peace? Let's name it. Because awareness is the first act of healing. So often, especially when we're in these awakened communities and going through this journey, everybody's like, oh, be high vibe all the time. That's just bullshit. You can't be high vibe all the time. Okay, I will say, as you go through the journey, you'll find that you spend more time in high vibe and high frequency. And at the same time, we are still having this human experience. There is a reality, quote unquote, of a world that's going on out there. And if there's things out in the world that we are not aligned with, there's something in us that still needs to be aligned. So name it, say it, speak it out, share it, because awareness is the first act of healing, of knowing, getting to the embodiment of whatever you're trying to accomplish. So you might feel resistance come up. You might feel guilt. You might feel fear, worry that people will leave, and sometimes they will. But baby, that's alignment doing its job. Because when you honor yourself, anything that's built on self-abandonment naturally falls away. Because people, once you shift your paradigm, a lot of people don't know what to do with you. So they'll lash out and act out and get all nutso, trying to draw you back in to self-sacrificing yourself. But nay, we are not doing that. So you find out the most about people when you tell them no. It's not a punishment, it's purification. And always remember that rejection is divine protection. Rejection is divine protection. So here's what happens when you start saying no from love instead of fear, guilt, or any other word you'd like to describe it as. But it's the base is always fear. Your whole world shifts. When you say no to chaos, you create room for calm. When you say no to hustle, you create room for flow. When you say no to relationships that drain you, you create room for divine connections that sustain you. And your yes becomes even more powerful because people will realize that if you're saying yes, she really wants to do this. She really means this. This is something she's really wanting to give her energy to. But if you say yes to everything, they're just like, that's just her. But your presence becomes magnetic. Your presence becomes even more sacred and appreciated. Because you're no longer negotiating your worth. You're embodying it. So let me tell you a story. When I started honoring my sacred no in business, in love, in my schedule, it was uncomfortable at first. Don't let me, blow smoke up your butt. It was uncomfortable at first. And I felt bad and sometimes guilty for choosing myself. Was I being too selfish? And I lost some things. I lost a few gigs, some relationships. Well, not even some, a whole lot of them. My circle started out super huge and now it's super, super small, and it gets smaller and smaller all the time. And I am so appreciative of that because it lets me know these people are really in alignment with me in this season of my life. And it could change. But, I've also lost parts of my old identity, parts that no longer serve me, limiting beliefs, and anything that was keeping me from choosing me first. But let me tell you, what I gained was peace. And that peace became the foundation for everything else that I have in my life. My wealth, my creativity, my love, my joy, and more authentic and fulfilling connections. So let's reflect. Ask yourself, where do I need to say no? Not because I'm angry, but because I'm ready to honor my alignment. Not because I'm depleted, not because I'm pissed off and frustrated, but because I really want to honor my energy, my time. Let's take a deep breath on that one. And imagine what would open up if you said no today. And said yes to yourself. So honoring your sacred no is not a wall. It's a doorway back to your truth, your energy, and your divine timing. Let's take another deep breath together. Ooh, I just love it. Because you did it. You sat with the power of your no while listening to this podcast. And you remembered that boundaries aren't barriers, they're blessings. So every time you honor your energy, you remind the universe that you're ready for more peace, more purpose, and more aligned joy. And I want to hear your sacred no moments. So tag me at More with V and share what no set you free this week. Because when one of us rises in truth, we all rise a little higher. So until next time, remember your boundaries are your blessings and your sacred no is your soul's greatest yes. Saying no isn't selfish, it's sacred. So today, we explored the power of your sacred no, how it protects your energy, clarifies your yes, and creates space for what's truly divine. Thanks for tuning in to More with V. If this episode spoke to your soul, share it and tag me at More with V. Of course, like I mentioned, I love to celebrate your sacred no. And I just love that we get to honor our sacred no as much as we honor our sacred yes. We're so used to honoring our yeses, but our no's are even more important. What are we saying no to? What are we choosing over us instead of us? And we get to shift that. We get to say, I get to remember that my boundaries are a blessing, and every no rooted in truth is a yes to my highest self. Thank you for listening, for joining me, and see you next time. Roar, baby. Thank you for watching. Special thanks produced by Deshaun J. Moore. Music, I'm Coming Out by Anu at Anu Groove. Thank you to all my listeners. Follow me on social media at More with V. Like and subscribe.